Hello and welcome to the ATG, the podcast, and I'm very pleased to be talking to Brewster Kahle today. Brewster needs no introduction. Perhaps I think the Internet Archive must be one of the world's best-known libraries. So thank you for joining, Brewster.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So can we start right back at your background? You actually didn't start out as a librarian. You studied computing for your degree. So how did you get interested in libraries?
The idea that we're basically going to go digital, everything was going to go digital. So this is back in 1980. And the idea of okay, since everything's, let's build the Library of Alexandria version 2. Let's build that dream that was promulgated and kind of promised already by Vannevar Bush or Ted Nelson. And it's like, how hard could it be? Let's just do that. Then I went off and studied it for a time at Simmons Library School.
Okay. So I understand that after computing, you got involved in some of the really early AI initiatives. So what kind of AI was around at that time compared to today?
So this is MIT, 1980, MIT's Artificial Intelligence Lab. And we wanted to build a thinking machine. And so we ended up building a computer and spinning it off as Thinking Machines Incorporated. And the idea was to, as Denny Hillis, one of the co-founders of Thinking Machines, he said we wanted to make a computer that would be proud of us. Just kind of the chutzpah of the day, so anyway, so that was the idea, and it was pretty clear to me that we were data starved. Even back at MIT, that we just didn't have enough to learn from, that if we're going to make computers that are going to be useful, we're going to have to make them interesting enough that people will want to talk to them and teach them things. And so I thought, okay, well, let's go and make it so that we can do large amounts of data. Now, remember, these are days when the first generation of the connection machine supercomputer by Thinking Machines had 32 megabytes of RAM. Really, we built the first large disk array. It was the size of a bar that you would have drinks on, and it could hold 5 gigabytes. And so this was the idea was still early on in terms of the computing evolution, but we knew where it was all going. We actually had conversations with, if I can name drop a little bit, with Marvin Minsky and Richard Feynman and Stephen Wolfram about, well, so when are we going to have the Library of Congress on these computers? And we could just draw out the curves from the Moore's Law point of view. What I didn't understand was actually how much institutional pushback we'd get on building an internet that had published works on it. But going and building an internet was something that we really knew we needed to do in the 80s, right? So we needed open source software, we needed a network, we needed computers that could work with open protocols. We needed what then became the World Wide Web. I helped put publishers on it. The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Encyclopedia Britannica, Scholastic. I made a little company that basically helped all these publishers find their way on this new internet thing. By 1996, I could turn my attention to building the library because enough of the infrastructure was there. And so we started the Internet Archive now 29 years ago, and been going along ever since.
It sounds remarkable that it sounds like you sort of you had the ideas ready formed from the beginning. But as I understand it, the Thinking Machine, this was a period of AI around the sort of connectionist the devices. And so as I understand, weren't you looking to sort of classify content or sort of do stuff with content in some way?
Oh yeah, we made the first search engine. We made the first search engine that was on the internet. It formed patterns. Bill Dunn, who was the founder of Dow Jones Electronics, he came up with the term metadata, and right, this is on top of Dow Jones, and he said the metadata is more important than the data itself. And going and knowing the patterns and how to move through it. He was absolutely right, and predating, whether it was Alexa Internet or Google or all these metadata-oriented systems. He was absolutely right. And so these supercomputers were there to build this. So yeah, I was just trying to deliver on the promises that have already been made, of going and making it so that you could get to the published works of humankind. I mean, libraries had a long tradition of being a winning idea, where everybody prospers in education and all. So the idea of just building it and making it happen was just seemed like more of a technical task, and turned out to not to be that way.
So, where did WAIS come in? I believe it's pronounced WAIS, WAIS.
WAIS stands for Wide Area Information Servers. And in the mid 80s, we thought, okay, well, we need to make it so that people want to interact with these things. So then this internet was coming around on the East Coast mostly. I mean, you had in some research labs. And so you could go and contact remote servers. And so wanted to make a client server system. So basically a little thing for your Macintosh. You could type in a query in English language and ask a lot of servers questions and bring them back and bring them into your on your Macintosh. Can you make it so that people could turn to their computers to answer questions? This was a radical concept at the time, and the idea also of personal publishing had been, there was ideas of this by Ted Nelson, but it hadn't really been made yet. So in 1989, wide area information servers predates the web by a bit, and then also Gopher, but they're sort of in the same sort of time period of trying to make it so that you could go and contact remote servers. One of the good things about WAIS was it was really designed around a publishing and a library model. It was using library protocol, Z39.50, but it also made it so that publishers could sell materials, and they could sell them and put them in multiple places. This is something that the web didn't get until much later, and kind of in many ways, not even really. So you could actually have things be in multiple places. The web has a URL where things are only in one place. And so the web is great because it's super simple. But it made it so that if publishers sold things and put them in libraries and personal, then how do you get things back out of there? It was only in one place. So it made it very publisher centric in a way that I don't think Tim Berners-Lee was really intending. So he tried to fix it by going and archiving the World Wide Web and making the Wayback Machine, but as a kludge on top of a system that should have had distribution.
So sounds like this sounds fascinating. What fascinates me is this your vision of the implications of content, if you like. It seems to me that all the sort of technical developments around sort of 2000 or sort of early then didn't necessarily take into account the implications of what you could do, or sort of how you could navigate your way around all that content. Where others, you said that not many people were thinking about that on the web. Don't you think that that's a sort of that's been the sort of the big change over the last 25 years, a slow realization that content is vital for doing things?
Oh, I think we always knew that. I mean, it was always completely clear. We had to do these other steps. Richard Stallman had to get the free and open source software going. We had to get the ARPANET transition to the internet, and that was Gordon Bell, and Vince Cerf and Bob Kahn, and there's all these work to go and try to make it so that we could then start moving information around. Right, the email was one of the earliest applications, FTP, Gopher. So people wanted to have access to these materials, and that was the promise of the net. I mean, it was to build the library of everything. That was so we argued that you could turn to your screen to answer questions. And based on some of the re-centralization that's gone on of the internet, really around sort of major publishing platforms, have made it so that we haven't really delivered in some of these key concepts. And so a lot of users basically did it. They basically started just using the net as their library. But I like the thing by the editor of Current Affairs. He titled his piece, "The Truth is Paywalled, but the Lies are Free." Truth is paywall, but the lies are free. So what most people are learning from is what you can get to for free. And because of some of the platforms, we've ended up with a lot of paid materials out there going to a very large number of people, making it so that even figuring out what's true and not true is actually really challenging. So the evolution of the business model has not gone the way that I had hoped. I wanted it to go with a royalty model, which is a many to many to many winner, right? We found that in books by the early 1600s. We had a royalty model work. And so you have lots of writers, lots of printers, it would evolve into publishers, and lots of booksellers, lots of libraries, lots of readers, and it all kind of worked without centralized control. But there was money moving back and forth. And otherwise, you get kind of more what happened before the 1600s, which was sponsored materials, where it was much more locked in and feudal, if you will. So it was much more licensed, would be, I can, use the modern term of where things are. And so by the 1600s, we actually had capitalism work. And so we had business models that worked that way. When we did the web, it's been much more, well, I don't know, feudal, and much more licensed, oriented, controlled environments. And you're not having authors paid very much back upstream because there's all these middlemen. So the web had the opportunity in the internet to basically directly connect people. And I still think that that's going to really be a winner for all sorts of players. We're going to have lots of people being able to prosper in this world if we can basically get some of that structure to work better.
Maybe we can come back to this when we move on to libraries. I think it's a fundamental point. But let's just finish off on the sort of your pioneering stuff. You co-founded Alexa Internet. What did Alexa Internet do?
Alexa Internet was short for the Library of Alexandria, and the idea was to help organize the web. So it did these sort of, if you like this web page, you'll like that web page, and it used the trails, the Bill Dunn concept of metadata, to go and find people who like this web page, like these web pages. So it's a way of finding your way around the web. And I don't know, we started both Alexa Internet and the Internet Archive on the same day. And so Alexa Internet, AI, and Internet Archive, IA. And we started those on the same day, where Alexa Internet would collect all these materials and donate it to a nonprofit for long-term preservation, because for-profit companies just don't last very long. And Alexa Internet built up, and then it was bought by Amazon.com because it knew how to do data mining and this pattern finding at scale, right, at the web scale, which was already very, very large by 1999. So it was, to be able to go and do that kind of thing was something Amazon found very attractive, and it led to more or less AWS, the sort of the stacked up Linux machines that are Amazon's web services. So that kind of supercomputer applied towards pattern finding of the metadata to help people navigate the web was what Alexa Internet was all about. Okay. It turned out to mostly be used as a web metrics organization, which is just a fraction of what it was designed for. But that was good enough to keep it around for about 25 years.
I remember using it to measure the traffic on my website, which is probably what everybody did.
Yeah, it was a free web metrics because it knew a lot of usage paths, but it also did this other set of functions.
Fine. So right from the start, then, it sounds like your vision of the Internet Archive was to sort of actually capture everything.
Yeah. It was to just try to build the library. I mean, remember, we've been promising this for decades and decades and decades. The World Encyclopedia from H.G. Wells in 1936, 1945 was Vannevar Bush. 1960s was Ted Nelson, and 1970s was Doug Engelbart. I mean, we promised this, and it was a really good idea. We just had to go and fulfill it. And there have been some stumbles along the way, but the search engines the magic of Google being able to help you find 10 pages out of a billion. That was AI way back in the day. I mean, that was going and using all sorts of signals to go and try to help find the right materials. So we were using AI way, way back before the generative AI and the transformer models that have come out recently, to be able to help us navigate through these enormous collections. And what's kind of great is people want to share. So we hit a milestone last week, which was completely great. That last week we hit the milestone of 1 trillion web pages being archived. So that means that there's probably a billion people's voices that people have wanted to share with the world what they knew, and it's been recorded and put into a library that's, I don't know, has certainly more voices than ever before. And I think it's just, people are awesome. People are great. The people have wanted to get it so that what they know is available as seamlessly, directly to other people as possible. And I'm hoping that that continues on, even though we have sort of other things sort of clouding our future. But I just want to take a pause, and that over the last 30 years, maybe a billion people have shared 1 trillion pages. So anyway, I find that just a milestone that should give us warm fuzzies about people, human nature, and the information ecosystem that people want to see happen, which is widespread dissemination of good information.
No, it is remarkable, the sort of the web sort of sharing lots and lots of input, which is what it was set up to do. When you started the Internet Archive, today there's a proliferation of any number of different media that are being collected. We know about books, but there's also movies and even 78 RPM records and things.
Yeah.
Did you envisage all those different media from the beginning, or have they been added
Sure.
piece by piece? Everything?
Um, no, everything, but I would have assumed that there'd be a lot more of us out there. So we tried to get the national libraries involved, and by going and making the IIPC, the International Internet Preservation Consortium, and we gave tools away. There's now 1,250 libraries that work with the Internet Archive to preserve web pages. So where I thought it would be basically people downloading and running their own tools, it's turned out that the Internet Archive has continued to play a community role where libraries and publishers use the Internet Archive's resources for long-term preservation, different kinds of finding or gathering of these materials, but it is their collections. So these 1,250 libraries are national libraries, universities, state libraries, municipal libraries, and all sorts of different museums that are going and building these collections. They keep the collections themselves and they're searchable, but they also then become part of the global memory that is the Wayback Machine. So that's also carried forward in books. There's 500 libraries that we actively work with to digitize materials at scale and make things available. Periodicals, television, audio recordings, trying to transfer these things to a generation that really they're digital learners now. If it's not woven into Google or Wikipedia, it's as if it doesn't exist. So you're basically, I just used Grokpedia for the first time yesterday, and it only has blue links. So in other words, if it's not linkable on the open web, like, no paywalls, then it doesn't make it into that version of the encyclopedia. So I think we're going to end up with more and more things just kind of being sequestered off. And I really want to make sure that we're standing on the shoulders of giants, that the next generation gets to go and leverage what we can openly of what has come from the past. There's plenty of money to pay for all of this. The library system is a $20 billion a year industry. It's socialized support for these publishers. But we're finding more and more, like even the newspapers, the local newspapers, they're not leveraging selling to libraries. Small local publishers aren't selling their ebooks. They're doing these licensing or not at all, and they're just saying, well, we're print only and then we'll die. And so we have to make a model where there are many winners. And I think we still can. And where we stand now is lots of individual personal publishing structures exist up a storm. When there's just the number of blogs and or Facebook pages or whatever of these personal publishing platforms that are out there, people are using them a lot. Let's see if we can get more winners out of this from a commercial perspective and fewer middlemen.
Hmm. You gave us some impressive stats about the number of pages uploaded, but how's all this financed? How do you finance this an enormous activity of capturing and digitizing content?
We're a mid-sized nonprofit, and we get our money from libraries and museums paying us to collect webpage for us. Also from foundations and individual wealthy people that sort of say, yes, we need to have active fighting against disinformation. So that communicates with a certain population. And then about 1/3 comes from end users that hit the donate button at the end of the year, kind of the Wikipedia or the NPR model of please. And that's about 200,000 people. So while we're still small, we're maybe 100 people in size. And, then there depends on exactly how you count. It doesn't, if you're really focused on what we're doing and you get tremendous help from others, right? None of this would be possible without the whole library system really coming together and trying to help make all of this go. So there's, that it's as I said, a $20 billion industry in the United States. We're tiny, but we're just a piece of it. And the idea is to try to get the library system, all in all, move forward with as efficient use of resources as possible. So we play kind of a cloud role for the open world because we're mission aligned. We do interlibrary loan. We do sort of your basic block and tackle library work. We also get physical collections. People donate physical materials to the Internet Archive, and we've working with other mission-aligned organizations to go and figure out how to go and do large-scale temperature and humidity control preservation of millions of books, microfilm, microfiche, videotape, film. Old software, CDs, long playing records, you mentioned 78s. These are things that aren't being used at all by anybody in commercial use and no use. And so can we go and at least preserve the physical materials, digitize them as funding allows, and then make them as available as you can in different jurisdictions? So in different jurisdictions, they're more or less in favor of libraries. So Internet Archive Canada, Internet Archive Europe have different in environments, legislative environments, whether there's more supportive of libraries and learning or less.
You mentioned national libraries, and an outsider might expect that it would be a national library that would set up the kind of the Internet Archive. Why do you think national libraries didn't do it?
Oh, they kind of have. They've just done it by working with the Internet Archive. So I remember going and delivering physical machines to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. But the way that they saw their laws is they weren't allowed to make those materials available anywhere. I mean, you had to go to a special room at just the right time of day. And some of the national libraries feel so constrained that they only have tens of thousands of websites that you can go into that room that no cameras are allowed to be able to see those web pages. And that's not really what libraries do. So I think we're in a time when we have to go and revisit the four rights of libraries that have always existed in the physical world, and then go and make sure that we're not shortchanging libraries going forward from those four basic rights. And if I could list them, it's collecting, buying things, preserving things, lending things, and working with other libraries, which in the physical world is how libraries, they predate copyright, they predate publishers. That's how they've always worked. But in the digital world, there's a number of libraries signing on to these four rights of digital libraries to make sure that we assert that they move forward into the digital era because it's contentious.
Let's talk a bit more about libraries. One of the things I find remarkable is that if you look up a term like public lending right on Wikipedia or wherever, there's a lot of text about the rights of authors to be paid for their content, and you've mentioned this, but there doesn't seem to be so much emphasis on the right of the public to read what's been written, and that right seems to have existed for books since sometime in the 19th century, but for some reason it doesn't seem to be anything like as well established for digital content.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the United States made big, huge steps forward 100 years ago and a bit more now with the Carnegie Libraries, where libraries would buy the books. And, at that time, actually, I think more money went back to authors than they do now. I mean, so the libraries fund a lot of the 20% of the trade publishing is from libraries funding. But it doesn't, at least that I could tell, much of it go back to authors. I mean, wouldn't it be great if 80% of what it is you spent on a book went to an author? That would be awesome. But just ask any author and they'll shake their heads. So I think we have some problems there as we've moved through the 20th century and into the 21st century. Well, we have the United States took education seriously 100 years ago, and legislatures and judiciary were in favor of libraries and library lending in the United States. The for sale doctrine, all of that to go and make it so you buy things, you really honest got buy them, and you own them, and then you can go and lend them one reader at a time. And it made it so that the United States, by the end of World War II, was prepared for the world stage. Where everybody else was bombed flat, the United States had an educated populace, had a school system, a public school system, a university system that was functional, working, bringing forward America into that new era. There are other countries that also now have a large number of young people that they're trying to educate, and they're going and making educational exemptions to be able to make it. China has long since made digital lending okay. In India, there's broad educational exemptions. When the public libraries went into a law case with the publishers, could they lend ebooks? The Dutch judge said yes, and so that was appealed by the publishers. And then in Luxembourg, there was another positive towards the library. So Europe wants libraries to be able to own and lend materials. So this is, we're just seeing different, maybe countries or empires in different phases of their world. I don't know. I don't know what the macro scale view is, but we're seeing different takes on what libraries, where there was great support in the United States 100 years ago, legislature and judiciary, we're seeing more and more rulings against libraries in the United States. So other parts of the world, they may be pursuing education more in a more diligent way.
One of the great achievements of the Internet Archive is the initiative of controlled digital lending. So tell us a bit about how that works.
Controlled digital lending is a simple system. It's the idea is you really buy a book or an electronic book, if you can buy an electronic book, and then you store it and you only let one person at a time read it. What we found out of this was interesting is people aren't going and substituting for buying to do this kind of reading. What they're doing is they're doing some fact checks. They're in and out of a book, kind of like web pages. In like 30 seconds to a couple minutes is the vast majority of the interactions with these materials. So when they're linked into Wikipedia, So a way Wikipedia works is you have an article and then you have references. And the way that you get to be a good reference in Wikipedia is you have to be a solid work, maybe like a book. And you need to be referenceable. It needs to be clickable. I mean, there are ones that aren't, but those get diminished weight. And so people will go to blog posts instead of going to published work. So we wanted to go and reinforce Wikipedia by going and making those so you can click on those and be able to open right to the right page, view it, finish your homework assignment, get a quotation from the real book, not the encyclopedia, and do the work the way we did when we were growing up. And so this is fantastic. I mean, it works really well. People really like it. The publishers sued in the United States to try to stop it, and they did. They won that lawsuit. So a lot of publishers have pulled out hundreds of thousands of books. In Europe, as I said, they've come up with a different balance of whether they want to have libraries still function. China, of course, as I mentioned, as part of the Million Books Project, was in favor of this digital lending within their educational, and this is 25 years ago. So controlled digital lending is going to work everywhere because it's the only way to go and bring our old collections online within an environment where you can't go and get permission for all these things that are 70 years out of print. I mean, this just doesn't make any sense. So so this will happen. It just will happen unevenly around the world based on the priorities of corporations and the governments in those places.
So, as far as I understand, the situation is that you can lend books that are out of copyright, but there's still this grey area, and the books that are still being sold as ebooks, those are not available. But there's still this grey area. Anyone who's ever been involved in publishing realizes that the majority of all the books you've ever published are no longer available because they're on the backlist and they're no longer in print. So there's a huge area of publishing where content just can't be found between that end of copyright and currently in print.
Certainly right. That, I mean, if we were just trying to raise our youth on things that are 100 years old, we're in trouble. And actually, I think Neil Stephenson wrote a book about what it's like to go and just try to raise a culture on only 100-year-old data. But out of print, actually, in the United States, is okay. If it's not available in ebook form, then it's okay. It's all sort of complicated and weird. That sort of American style approach. But there are publishers that are publishing ebooks that they're not selling them anymore. I mean, if we could actually buy ebooks, the world would be a very different place. I mean, just that one change. If we could buy ebooks or movies or MP3s, we could have many more publishers, many more booksellers. We'd have a whole marketplace. But right now, what we've got is these sort of consolidated single platforms, like Netflix, right? Where you never get to actually own anything, and they can blink it offline or change it at any time, and they do. So there's a business model thing that's going on now that is a bit challenging for a generation trying to grow up referencing online, but we have people wanting to make things available. So you take scientists and academics that are putting things in archive with an X, because that's a way to make it available before it goes off into these publisher platforms, which basically means that very few people will see it and very few people will refer to it and there's all these statistics about this doesn't happen. So but we're trying to get to a place where we have support for authors and we have support for libraries, bookstores. We have a game with many winners. And I would suggest what we should do is just sell things, go back to actually capitalism, come out of the feudal era and go into the Enlightenment, when we started to actually make it so you could go and make a living as an author, which would be kind of great. So you're not under somebody else's thumb in a licensed owned medieval world, but we go into an Enlightenment where we have commerce being able to help move ideas around as opposed to working against us.
Sounds good. There was one major initiative, an attempt to sort of to try and to capture digitally all the world's content, and that was the Google's Books initiative. But for some reason, it failed. Why do you think it failed?
Oh, I don't think it's failed for them at all. I don't know how many they have. It's like 28 million books. I think we only have 8 or 9 million.
Mm,
They've used it for their search engine, their AI, their translations. They've been doing all sorts of great things with it. There's a copy that's kind of available, I hear, for some people in Hathi Trust. I think if you're in some, I don't think you can get the modern material, and I'm not quite sure. Um, but for Google, I think the idea of going and digitizing these, they're still at it. They're at it. And now we have other AI companies that are buying up books and then destroying them by the millions. So this is what's currently going on. So where I would much prefer to have libraries that could be used by these
mm,
organizations, but in the United States, things are so confusing that the only way to get fair use, which is kind of the hook to the First Amendment,
mm,
which is why the United States has search engines at all, like Europe doesn't have search engines.
mm,
We have a First Amendment, and we have fair use, and la da da da. So how do we go and extend that so we have libraries being able to function in this digital era the same way, or hopefully better, but at least not worse than what library rights were in the physical era. So right now, it's these commercial companies going and doing what they can, even because there aren't functional libraries able to interact with them in ways that they'd like to. We would like to help build climate GPT. Can we go and make it so that we can go and solve some of the big problems using our new AI tricks, but by having it know the best we know about climate. And Europe has got regulations that allow that, which is kind of great. So that stuff is going on in Europe and in Switzerland. But in the United States, I think we're really hobbling the Department of Energy based on basically regulatory unclarity. And, of course, we don't have a House of Representatives right now, and the government's shut down. So
mm,
the United States has its broad scale issues going on that are slowing down the United States in some of these key industries. What we want is many winners. We want lots
mm,
of different specialized communities going and leveraging these materials. We just got a collection from CABI, the Center for Agricultural and Biological Information in London. And it's a product of empire. They basically had the agricultural records and pest records from a century of running an empire. And these materials were in print form and not being used very much. And so they decided to flip it digital. They donated them, and we've digitized them. And we now have all of these materials in really pristine form. So you can go and understand what the pests in Mexico that are going to
mm,
soon be arriving in Louisiana, if they haven't already, because of the shifting climate change. We need to know this information, and the libraries have it. But the regulatory clarity in the United States is such that it's just lawsuits all the time. And so we're hobbling our scientific research in the United States. Fortunately, other countries are quickly filling the gaps.
mm. As I understood, and it was confusing, the Google Books initiative seemed interesting because briefly there seemed the prospect of a sort of a kind of cooperation between major libraries that could result in sort of kind of one and one makes three, sort of benefit to all of them. But that coalition didn't seem to have survived. That's what didn't happen from the books initiative. There's a
We
memorable.
didn't get the Library of Alexandria. I think that was sort of what the New York Times is going, oh, this is great. Right? And then it's like, I'm not so sure that's what you're going to sign up for in this case. But it did help a commercial company. And so I think we have an opportunity with the technology, and we have the money to go and make it so that people are paid, that things are done well, that we just need jurisdictions that want libraries.
Hmm. Your the work you've done with Cabby is commendable, but surely there must be a limit to the amount of if you're trying to capture all the world's content and then trying to sort of make it usable, there's a limit to what one organization can do. Surely the sort of isn't it a more feasible option to try and educate people in the possibilities of digital and sort of encourage the kind of sharing so that organizations digitize and sort of and share this stuff with you and with others.
Remember, 1 trillion web pages. I mean, there's, I mean, this is a global movement by people
Mm,
to go and make this all happen. And we're working with, as I said, thousands of libraries. And there are other consortia doing these sorts of things. And then we need to be able to swap them back and forth, as we are with for the blind and dyslexic.
mm,
There are treaties that allow us to move all these books and things around the world. This is what it's going to take on some of the challenges that we're facing. Climate change is just one of the health changes that are going to be coming through. Or we have different kinds of diseases that are going to be springing up in different places. How are we going to learn about them if we just run into paywalls and knows and can't do it?
mm,
But people want to make this stuff available. And
mm,
I'm very optimistic on the people side. And let's see if we can get people paid around and outside of some of these. I think of, why did we have to make Wikipedia? Wikipedia, I think, is one of the shining gems of our generation. It's fantastic. But why did we have to write it all down again? And it's because the copyright had gone so far wrong. Wikipedia is built on the free and open source software model. It was originally the GNU license that we
mm,
did so well in the software area to go and make it so the United States could flourish. Basically, Richard Stallman made a system with some rights reserved, right? And so it made for companies and lots, it wasn't like companies all went out of business because we have open source software. No, we have lots of businesses. And so Wikipedia did that same model in the content area. And you can't write down everything again. But they're doing pretty well, and it's very, very useful. And it's just because they're basically avoiding the 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 rat hole, the quicksand that was put in place, that has slowed down people learning and growing and building businesses.
mm. One of the great initiatives that the Internet Archive has done is being at the kind of forefront of making stuff available, and one of those was the National Emergency Library. So that was during COVID. What was that about?
So, in over one weekend, all libraries in the United States and really around the world were closed. And we've got a lot of people trying to add themselves to the Open Libraries program, where they could basically take the books that they had on their shelves and be able to go and sequester those and then lend them one at a time to their patrons. Right, that's the Open Libraries program. In a nutshell. So it was basically, we had been doing this for years, and then all of a sudden, lots wanted to join. We said, great, just send us your catalogs of books. And they said, it's all shut down. Our IT staff can't get in there, da, 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 da. So we got 100 libraries to go and sign on to the National Emergency Library, going and supporting this initiative of lending their materials that are sequestered. And so it was a system that was only going to run for 3 months. And it ran for about 2.5 months, and we were sued. But it helped basically parents and teachers that were locked away from the books they had in their collection. So we used this commitment from these libraries to say that they had these physical materials, and then we made more copies available to those readers. And it worked very well during its time. And yeah, it's very sad that there's some people that sort of spring into how can I help, and then there's others that wanted to make sure that that wouldn't happen.
Mm,
And so that ended the we closed the that program 2 weeks early.
mm. Going back to to this vast collection of content you've got. One of the things about Gen AI, which of course we're all aware of today, is that for Gen AI to work, it needs a vast corpus, and actually one of the largest corpus is the Internet Archive. So in a way, you've sort of you've done it the other way around. You've got the corpus. Do you not feel, having seen what Gen AI can do, do you not feel tempted to or perhaps you're already involved in initiatives to sort of to make use of that corpus and see what can be done with it?
Oh yeah, we're designed for this. We're designed for this. This is but the United States is going in a very strange, well, maybe not. It's going into a direction where we're just ending up with lawsuits, where there's going to be a few big players on either side going and divvying up the world. When you have a settlement, you're just going to end up with the people at the table that going and divvying up the world. And so then the people and libraries are not at that table. So we're probably going to, in this country, if we don't have a little more enlightened leadership out of corporations, or, hey, wouldn't that be great if we had a legislature again? We're just going to end up with a few big monopoly players that are going to stall out all innovation. I mean, they'll just basically, go into their defensive posture as soon as they can to make sure that nobody else comes near them. And as we've seen with all the monopoly structures that evolve when they come to dominate a market. So other countries, Switzerland, for instance, has a rule that lets the robots read as long as you're doing scientific research. So there's 3,000 Google employees there. There's outside of Zurich, there's 1,000 Meta. There's startups galore in Switzerland. Europe is taking the sort of middle post. It's sort of, and of course, China is rolling along quickly. So the opportunity here, and what the Internet Archive was designed for, is to make a game with many winners and make it so that you can navigate the net and navigate ideas and bring the riches of our pasts and our past writings and our past everything, right? So we're standing on shoulders of giants. That was the whole point of libraries, and what gave us the scientific revolution was the idea of publishing in such a way people could get access to it. The new way people want to get access to it is all these language models. It's a cool trick. Let's have thousands of them. Let's have lots of innovation going on in our universities, and no. And the United States is kind of it's having troubles. And if they really miss out on this, then we'll end up with a few gigantic players, right? That could be world dominating, but there's but other countries that take a more open view towards having innovation work by smaller players, they'll see this opportunity and jump on it.
Have you thought of creating your own LLM?
We do some playing around with it. Mostly we deal with others. Like in Europe, Internet Archive Europe is working with a research organization, a nonprofit research organization, to do climate GPT, or to do large language models of small languages. They did a collection of Afrikaans. So it's not only does it translate it into LLM speak from Afrikaans and then back out. No, all it knows is Afrikaans. And what I heard from the group doing that is the literature in Afrikaans has a lot of swear words and a lot of so you get a lot, because it's a border language, and so it reflects the culture. So I think that there are people that are going to want to have their culture represented to help them educate their kids. I mean, if we just educated the last 20 years of kids on Google, it's going to be on these AIs. And if you were Bulgarian, would you want to have the choice of your LLM having an American accent or a Canadian a Chinese accent, or would you want it to be Bulgarian? And I think that let's use these tools to foster an interesting, diverse ecosystem of ideas that's not just going to dumb us down and with schlop. I mean, that term is I think a little derogatory towards some of what I've seen the AI organizations be able to pull off. But that may be a lot more of the direction that we're going if we're just going to end up with a few gigantic players then starting to turn and play defense. So I want a game with many winners. That was the idea of the decentralization of the internet, of the World Wide Web. Um, let's it's a place that many people can find how they can go and make businesses work, make libraries work, and everybody a reader.
Sounds great. Do you use the archive yourself? What was the last book you read on the archive?
I don't tend to read books on the archive, actually. I just use it for going and checking around on different facts, right? I look for names, I look for things in the periodicals of the books. I maybe I'm just old, but the idea of flipping through these, it's kind of painful. And in fact, that's what we find actually on our digitized books is people don't read things end to end. They just don't. So this whole idea is like, oh, it's going to substitute for beach reading. Is like, have you tried? And of course, the answer is no, but I'm against it. And so I think we're seeing a new and different use, more like a reference collection, where you're standing next to the shelves and you're pulling off and you're opening it up, looking something up, putting it back. That's how I use the Internet Archive's digitized collections.
And what have you been reading in print?
Oh gosh, On Freedom by Timothy Snyder, I find is a fascinating book of just what does that word freedom mean? It's thrown around a lot these days. So that I find a really the Dawn of Everything by David Graeber has been captivating my family, so we've been trading that around and learning and having fun with that.
Well, it's been remarkable talking to you, Brewster, and great to hear the sort of the story of the Internet Archive and how it's developed. I, for one, would find it impossible to not to use it. It's sort of the idea of having all these books at arm's length is just and like you, I look up way more books than I ever read, but that doesn't mean it's not useful. It's wonderfully useful. It's incredibly useful.
Yeah, just bits and pieces.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I really we librarians live for people like you to say thank you. So it's based on people using these materials that give me a sign of hope that we're not just waiting for the next Taylor Swift album to come out and that's it. That people want old materials. The Internet Archive is the 200th most popular website. Approximately, because Alexa Internet's gone, so but I think it's around 200th most popular. So people want old stuff, and if you make it available, even in the 20th century, they'll learn from it, which is just great. And boy, do we need to have an educated populace because we're starting to forget some of the lessons of the 20th century.
Absolutely, that's a good point to end. So thanks very much, Brewster, for your time, and good to talk to you.
Thank you very much.